Coach Little here to talk a little bit about our 2023 cross-country season that wrapped up today. It's one that, had a few different twists and turns maybe that we weren't expecting. Just a few weeks ago, we weren't even, looking at the opportunity to compete, be able to compete as a team in the postseason. And then, that changes in the last couple of weeks and changed, what we're able to do, for our season. So going back to region last weekend, we competed in the Region 5A Championship there at Bourbon County. Probably, I would imagine, one of the tougher region courses in the state. And we end up with the 5th place finish. And as a team, however many teams enter the race, full teams, that's how they determine how many advances. So if it's 12 or more, 6 teams go, and we were the 5th place team. So we earned that spot in the state meet. It was a pretty tight meet in 2nd through 6th place. LCA sort of ran away with it on the front end. Frankfort, I think, had 123 points. And then you had, for 2nd place, 3rd and 4th place were something like 133 and 134. So 3rd and 4th there, very close. And then we were right behind at, I think, 137 for 5th place. And Danville Christian right behind us had 138 points. So 2nd through 6th, that span was, very tight. But even more so, the 3rd through the 6th place was very tight and a very competitive race. But, we were, obviously happy to get, into the state meet and ran that today back at the horse park for the first time since 2019. So, they haven't even had regular meets at the horse park since 2019. So none of the kids on my team had ran the horse park, at least for a 5K. Grayson probably did some 3 or 4Ks there at one point, but was our first time competing there this season. Grayson, John, and Nolan were able to go there about 3 weeks ago and compete in a race. Of course, Elijah and Jesse had not had the opportunity to compete there. So not a lot of familiarity with the course, and that does make a difference. But, it stayed dry for us today in terms of rain. It did rain overnight, so the course was a little damp. May have slowed it down a little bit compared to normal. And I think that's reflected a little bit in our times. Most of our times today were a little slower than they were at region. That could be part of it. Part of it could also be that, just the congestion in the state race, 250 plus runners slows you down sometimes on the first mile. But nevertheless, Grayson was actually, sort of defied that when opposite. He did get faster from the regional meet. And I think part of that was because Grayson didn't feel real great last weekend. Of course, he finished with the 4th place finish out of 89 runners in region. Ran a 17:44, I think, or 46, somewhere in there. And came back today and did decrease his time. Ran a 17:26. And, Grayson was able to place 18th today. So a little bit out of his goal. He wanted to medal. That's top 15 in the state. But still, given the season that he's had, which we'll touch on in a little bit, a top 20 finish at state, I think is, you cannot complain about that, given some of the interruptions he's had with his training. And as a team, we finished 36th, we finished 26th out of 35 full teams there today in Class A. So, again, if you're thinking about how we finished in the past few years, the past 3 years, we've had a 12th place, a 4th place, and a 6th place finish at state. Obviously not on par with those, but given how the season unfolded, I think a 26th place finish is very respectable. And keep in mind, obviously, there's 35 teams, full teams there today, but there's a lot more teams than that in Class A overall. So, you're not just really 26th today, but you kind of can take that as 26th best in the Class A statewide, regardless of whether they were there today or not. And I think that's an accomplishment given how we put our roster together. Anytime you can add 2 guys with a couple weeks left in the season, I think do what we were able to do is impressive. And these are guys that had been running a little bit on their own. They play basketball, and they've been doing some conditioning for basketball and running some on their own. But anyone who's ran a little bit, and particularly if you ran cross country, you know that the training that you do in cross country is a lot different. It's a lot more technical. There's a lot more to it than just going out and running. But nevertheless, them having been running some on their own, I think, did obviously help them and helped our team. So to sort of go through the roster this year, we had Grayson Miller, and Grayson was in such a fit position in late July. I was really excited. He was coming out of running camp, and I was really excited to see what kind of season he was going to have unfold. And, then late July, he mentioned having some pain, and it kind of persisted for about a week, and went to the doctor, and he was ultimately diagnosed with a couple stress fractures, one in each leg, actually, and that put him with no running at all for 5 weeks. And then the week that he came back, I think he only ran 5 miles for his 6th week. And really, even the next couple weeks, we were building back up. So, here at the end of the season, we've peaked at, 30 miles. But Grayson is one in the past who would run 50 to 55 miles. That was last year. Probably would have gotten further than that this year. So, even though he's back in terms of I think, recovered, kind of seeing the effects of just missing all those weeks of training, and then the reduced training. He's been pretty much limited to 5 miles a day, so far. And, on one of the easier days before, he would probably get more than 5 miles. So you take away, that mileage, you take away the long run that he's not had the capability of doing, hurts his endurance. And I think what he's been able to do, despite the time off and despite the training restrictions, I think he ultimately, has ended with a good season there. I know not quite hitting the goals that he wanted, but, hard to be disappointed, given what he's went through there. Next in, we had John Hamm this season. John is one who missed a significant amount of time in the off season. He was injured started with an injury in basketball way back in mid to late January, and ended up missing the entire track season, and didn't actually come back to running until the 1st of July. And that was actually a little bit earlier than he was anticipated to come back. So that was a positive, but went 5 to 6 months with no running, not really the ability to do the cross-training type activities like cycling or swimming or things like that. So very little physical activity there for 5 to 6 months. So coming back from that, we wanted to be careful with him, obviously, and really methodically build him back up. And, John was able to PR this season. So I thought, that's always a positive. Coming back from the kind of injury that he had and the amount of time he was off, to come back and get that personal best again this season was good to see. With Nolan, actually ended last cross-country season with a stress fracture. So we were pretty methodical with him as well in the early part of the season. Wanted to make sure we built him up properly, try to avoid any repeat of that injury. Nolan also got a PR this year, so it's always good to come back and be able to do better than you did last year. And even these last 2 weeks, Nolan's had a different issue kind of pop up in his knee. Didn't seem to be anything serious, but was causing some discomfort. And, even this week, we cut back his mileage. We just tried to keep him somewhat fresh for the state meet. But, Nolan even kind of running through a little bit of injury here at the end of the season. Elijah Johnson, Jesse Johnson were the 2 runners that we added here at the end. Elijah brand new to the sport, never ran before. Jesse did run in middle school, so he kind of had had an idea of what cross country was about, having ran for us before a few years ago. But both seniors, so those were, of course, the 2 guys. It takes five guys to have a full team, and those were the 2 guys that came out and, like I said, had done some running on their own, which helped out, and they were, good enough and competitive enough to, like I said, allow us to, advance in the regional meet to qualify for the state meet. So obviously we ended for what this season was on a high note. But there were a lot of, obstacles, a lot of adversity, I feel like, this season. It was a challenging season for me as a coach, and we didn't really talk about this. It's the first time I really said it where the kids would hear it, but it was a challenging season. And I know it was a challenging season for the kids as well, even though we didn't talk about that. We talked a lot in the off season about what we could do this year. And, we added a couple guys last year in August, so we obviously had them longer than we had our 2 new guys this year. They had, probably 8 to 10 weeks of training, got to go set in several meets. We got the region runner-up finish last year. And that was coming off of 2 years winning region championships. So we really felt like for this season, we were talking in the off season, we felt like we were very confident that we could, maintain that region runner-up status at minimum this year, and really thought we could give LCA a battle for a region championship with another year under everybody's belt, another year of training. And you leave school in May, we had 9 kids signed up to run. I knew all those kids wouldn't come out. It's pretty typical that kids will sign up and some of them don't come out. But I thought with 9 signing up, we ended up with 5 or 6. But the way things unfolded, various circumstances, you start the season in July with 3 runners. And, that's obviously disappointing because, like I said, it changes your whole perspective. You go from a team focus to solely an individual focus. I mean, cross country is a individual sport, but it also has those team components that we've enjoyed the last few years. So I know it was difficult for the guys to come into the season, or going to the summer expecting to have those team goals, and then you don't have those anymore. Those are kind of taken away. So even though it was sort of unspoken, I know that was a disappointment. And then, like I mentioned, with Grayson's injury, Grayson, like I said, was in such a great spot. I thought, like, training-wise in July, and then to have to take time off. And, anytime you're short on guys anyway, whenever you lose somebody, your practices just get a little bit harder. You go from 3 down to 2. Makes it even more, it makes it tougher, not just obviously on Grayson because he's the one that missed the time, but it's hard on the guys that are left. And, so yeah, Grayson's injury. John was out a couple different weeks with illness. I thought, even when John was really hitting a stride, John had been very dedicated in the early part of the season up until, probably the first week in September when he had to miss a whole week of school with illness. So again, just kind of sets you back. So, different things and different circumstances and most of it out of our control, with things that happened that made this season a difficult one. Challenging, but our 3 main guys stuck with it. They worked hard. They stayed dedicated. I do think it kind of paid off because we were able to come back this year, like I said, for the 4th consecutive year, participate in the state championship. And there's a lot of schools and a lot of teams and a lot of programs that can't say that. They haven't had that opportunity. And I'm glad that we were able to keep that streak alive. And that makes the 5th team appearance for our program that we know of. And all 5 of those have been since 2017. So even though it was a challenging season, I'm glad that it sort of ended on a positive note. One thing that wasn't, an obstacle this year or didn't have a lot of adversity really was our feeder programs. Now, the middle school team was still small and still young, only a couple of 6th graders, but particularly our elementary program had good numbers this year. Probably the best numbers they've had in maybe 5 or 6 years. I'm not sure. I know it's the best, the biggest team, I should say, that Coach Browning's had since she took over that program. But I think she had anywhere from 12 to 14 elementary students. And, if you think about how many kids we have in those grades, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which is what our elementary, that's the grade levels we allow our elementary runners to join, that's about 15%. And that's a very healthy number for, cross-country track and field. If you get 15% of the kids, to join, that's a good number. So now a lot of those are younger, especially on the boys' side, 3rd grade, 4th grade, just starting out. We do have I think a fifth grader, a fifth grade female who had some success this year, and a third grade female too. But obviously, the fifth grader would be in middle school next year, and looking forward to her hopefully continuing on. The downside is after John Hamm as a sophomore, we don't have any other runners until you get to a couple of those sixth graders that we had this year. So obviously, we're gonna have to try to do some work in getting some runners who maybe haven't ran to this point or who ran in the past, get them to rejoin the team, because we're going to need some help there soon with numbers. But a big positive this year I thought was the elementary program and the growth in numbers that they're continuing to see. So the season officially concludes today, but a couple of our guys are not finished quite yet. Grayson and John are planning to do a race, I think it's November 11th, the Lloyd White Memorial Distance Festival. At this race, they'll be competing as individuals. They won't be competing as Augusta runners, but they will be competing, and it's actually a 2-mile race on a track, so kind of unique. There's a lot of postseason races for cross country. You can go different places, Louisville or even as far away as New York, South Carolina, North Carolina, places like that, Tennessee, and do some of these, I call them postseason or after your school season type races. 5Ks and things, but this is sort of unique in this 2-mile race, and Grayson did it last year, so this will be the first time John has done it. So they'll continue to train for the next couple weeks, and I'll train with them a couple days a week and help them oversee that training. I'll stay involved with them, but looking forward to that. Last year there was snow on the ground when we went there, so hopefully it won't be quite that cool this year. But we'll do that training for a couple weeks, and then, John and Grayson will they'll get a week or two off from training totally, let their bodies kind of recover, and then it is into track and field season. Track and field season officially starts December 1st, and it's the same start for indoor and outdoor. They don't really distinguish the difference for indoor and outdoor for track and field. We obviously will just start with our indoor training, but track and field signups are actually coming up on November 10th. That is the plan. That'll be for indoor and outdoor. We'll do signups for both and give information on both. And just if people are interested and maybe not sure if they want to sign up but want to see what we have, they'll come to. We can invite them to that sign up meeting, and we'll start our indoor training mid-December. So we'll give them some workouts to start doing, some training to start doing after Thanksgiving or so, probably for indoor, but we'll start coming together for some practices in mid-December, and I'll probably do a video coming up here soon, maybe about track and field specifically, and kind of what student athletes can expect there. That's gonna do it, I think, for this video. Just wanted to get on here and share a little bit about our season, about some of the struggles that we've had, but also about some of the successes we've had. Anytime, guys can get personal records, it shows they're improving, and that's a good sign. And Grayson, to come back and have 4 races under 17:30, I think, given his obstacles, is, positive for him this season. But thanks for listening in, and we'll be back soon with track and field. Everybody take care.